Hi, I'm Kirsten with Dakota County, and today I'm joined by Brad, who's going to talk about how to solder and what to solder at home. Before we hear from Brad, I'd like to give a quick overview of our Fix-It Clinic program. Fix-It Clinics offer free guided assistance from volunteers with the skills to disassemble, troubleshoot, and repair your small household appliances, electronics, mobile devices, clothing, and more. Fix-It Clinics offer free repair skills, build community, and keep the number of repairable items out of the trash. Like our in-person events, we hope that these recorded videos will inspire and empower you to repair your items at home. Now, without further introduction, let's hear from Brad.
So today I'm going to be covering cable repair using soldering. Say you have a damaged cable for whatever reason. Step one is to determine the best way to repair it. With many common household items, it's easy to simply replace the cable entirely. DC power at 5 volts or 12 volts doesn't pose any fire risk. So if you have any items like that that have a damaged cable, definitely give soldering a try to repair it. For common DC cables, there isn't any risk, unlike 120 volt cables, to repair them in this way. They're cables at 5 volts, like the USB is, or 12 volts, like many other items, don't pose any fire risk if the cable gets internally shorted. So if you're feeling wary about cable repair, just make sure your device is running at that low voltage. And generally, you can, if your device comes with like a power brick, you can see on that brick input 120 volts, output 5 volts or 12 volts. So the first thing you'll need is a soldering iron. Depending on the cable you are repairing, that'll determine your tip size. Generally, smaller wire means smaller tip, and that's just for transferring the appropriate amount of heat. Next thing you'll need is solder. For basic repairs, you can just use flux core solder. It'll have a note on it saying 2% or 1% flux, or it'll just say that it's flux core. You also need wire strippers, which are good to have for any electrical repair. And the next thing you'll need is a way to insulate the wires after they're joined together. So one way to do that is electrical tape. But for a better result, you can get heat shrink, which can be used with just a simple lighter. Heat shrink gives a much better result than electrical tape and doesn't cost too much. So if you're trying to get a nice permanent repair, I definitely recommend it. And something that'll make repair a little bit easier are these adjustable alligator clips or helping hands. And they just hold the cable in place and just make it a lot easier. So the first step is, with your damaged cable, you're going to want to cut out the damaged part to have nice clean ends on both of the halves. Then you'll want to strip back the cable's sheath, and you'll just have to see the approximate size and you'll just have to see what gauge it is with your wire stripper. So this appears to be about 16 gauge. And you'll want to strip it back about an inch or so. And do the same on the other cable. And now just take a second to inspect the wires inside and make sure they didn't get damaged with removing the cable sheath. And they look okay. Next thing to do is remove the insulation from the conductors themselves. And these are smaller than the smallest gauge on my wire stripper. but that's fine. Just put in the smallest gauge and angle it a little bit so that the wire gets caught by both sides of the stripper, and slowly pull it back. And now do that for each other wire. I'm just twirling these strands together so they don't get out of hand. And I actually accidentally cut the wire entirely, but that's fine. So long as you have enough cable, you can just do it over again. All right, now we have exposed wires on both halves of our cable, so we can begin soldering. And with the cable and the helping hands, I'm just going to line up the red wires, copper. With this small of a cable, it is just a little bit delicate, and these really help. You can get them for about $10 online. For larger cables, or if you have just more wire to work with, at this step you can do something called a lineman's splice, where you twist the wires together, and that'll give the join more strength. With this amount I've worked with, I'm just going to go right to soldering it. If you have an adjustable heat on your soldering iron, you'll just kind of want medium heat. So if you've got some oxide on your solder, just clean it off with a wet sponge and apply a little bit of solder to the tip. Now from underneath, now get the soldering iron underneath and just slowly touch it to the wires, and it'll transfer heat to the copper. Then from above, just kind of go across and apply the solder. You don't want to touch the soldering iron with the solder itself if you can avoid it. You want it to touch the copper, and then it'll melt and adhere to it. All right. And clean off excess solder. And now we'll do the same with the other wire. So I'm going to just flip this around. Move the helping hands. And just get them to join the best I can in this tight space. And then do the same thing. Now inspect and make sure you don't have any copper from one wire touching the copper of another wire. Sometimes with small wires, you'll just have a little strand. And it looks like I have one. And I can just go ahead and go in with a nail clipper or something and cut it. Okay, so heat shrink would give a better result and most appropriate for larger cables and especially power cables. But here, there just wasn't enough room to put it on and still have room to apply the solder. So I'll just use electrical tape. And you'll also want scissors. And you only need enough to have all the exposed copper covered. Again, make sure any stray strands don't cross the path. And fully insulate both wires. There's a lot of exposed copper on the black wire, so I'm going to do it in 2 rolls. Okay, so now all the copper is fully insulated. It doesn't look pretty, but we're going to wrap it all up and it'll look just fine. Let's get another run of electrical tape and just tightly bind them together. All right, and this cable should be good to use again.